I'm a biology professor at the University of Cincinnati. I walk through Burnet Woods a couple times a day to and from my car. And I lead nature hikes at Burnet Woods on Sundays at 2:30. And I bring my classes over here. So I'm very familiar with Burnet Woods. Yeah, Burnet Woods is a 90-acre park. It has a nice variety of native trees. And some of them are pretty old. Some of these trees are a couple hundred years old or older. There's been a big problem with non-native invasive species in Burnet Woods, like the Amur honeysuckle and porcelain berry and so forth. So there's been a great deal of effort trying to remove the invasive species. So mainly through volunteers who come here and clear out honeysuckle and other invasive plants. And that gives the native plants a chance to repopulate the area. There are several native plants in this area right here. So this is called the calico aster. Those bloom in the fall. Very important for pollinators, like monarch butterflies that are passing through here in the fall. This is a pawpaw tree. It's a Asimina triloba. The family is the Annonaceae. It's a tropical family, but this species actually grows in the north. Sometimes it's called the Michigan banana or the Indiana banana, and it gets a large fruit on it that's quite delicious. They're called pawpaws. It's a large berry about the size of a pear. And I grow these in my yard because there's a butterfly called the zebra swallowtail, which only lays its eggs on pawpaw leaves. So if you want to have zebra swallowtails, you've got to have pawpaw, because that's what the caterpillars eat. Okay, this is the American witch hazel. And today is October 30th, 2024, and it's in flower right now. It has these yellow flowers on it with the strap-like petals. Witch hazel's really the last thing to bloom in this part of Ohio in the fall. Some of them won't bloom until December. So this is actually kind of early for this. But it's a native shrub. And the reason they call it witch hazel is because the leaves look like the leaves on hazelnuts. And back in the old days, if they were trying to find a good place to dig a well, they did what they called water witching, where they took a forked stick and walked around, and if the stick bent toward the ground, they said, okay, that's where you should dig your well. They like to use witch hazel for that. So the witch is from the witching for water. That's where the word comes from. Okay, this is called white snake root, and it's a native plant. It blooms in the fall. It's very beautiful. It contains a lipid-soluble toxin. So if cows eat this plant, the toxin gets concentrated in their milk. And if you drink the milk from cows that have been eating white snake root, it can make you very sick or even kill you. And Abraham Lincoln's mom died from what they called the milk sickness, and that was from drinking the milk from cows which had eaten that plant. But it's really great for pollinators, who are like monarch butterflies who are passing through here in the fall. They rely on these fall blooming plants like the asters, white snake root, and goldenrods. Every year there is a new non-native invasive plant that shows up in Burnet Woods. So in order to maintain the native plant community, the park staff and volunteers are going to have to be very vigilant about removing non-native invasive plants. And that'll have to be done in perpetuity. It will have to be done forever. Otherwise, they'll just take over and you'll lose all your native plants. Okay, this is called porcelain berry, and it's a plant that's in the grape family. It's from Asia, and it was introduced as an ornamental because the berries can be quite colorful and people like things like that. But it's highly invasive. It's non-native, it's invasive, and I call it the kudzu of the north because it's so aggressive and can actually, just cover all the native vegetation. Okay, this is called winter creeper. So this is a very aggressive, non-native invasive plant. It's from Asia. It's in the bittersweet family. The problem is it will produce fruits that birds will eat, and then it gets spread into places where it wasn't intended to be, like these woods here. The ground's covered with winter creeper, and it stays green all winter. That's why it's called winter creeper. And it'll climb trees and get all these little fruits on it that the birds will eat and disperse the seeds. Okay, this is a non-native invasive tree species. It's called the Norway maple. And it was introduced intentionally. It's a very popular street tree and tree that people plant in their front yards. But it is not native, it's highly invasive. Just like the other maples, it produces little winged fruits called samaras. And those are dispersed by the wind, so they can be dispersed over long distances. And here in Burnet Woods, there are very many Norway maples, which shouldn't be here. There should be sugar maples and other native maples. The problem is, if you have a native species, like a native white oak, you might have 600 species of native moths that are laying their eggs on the white oak leaves. But if it's a non-native species, like the English oak or the sawtooth oak, sawtooth oak is from Asia, none of the native caterpillars are going to be eating those leaves. It's much better to plant native species of maples instead of these Norway maples. This is an American beech, Fagus grandifolia. All the oaks and chestnuts and beeches are all in the same family. It's called the Fagaceae. They provide food for native caterpillars. Lots of different moth species will lay their eggs on the oaks, especially. And the caterpillars feed on the leaves. And the caterpillars are very good at converting plant material into animal proteins and lipids. So the birds in the spring are feeding their babies caterpillars. Okay, so if you want caterpillars, you got to have the native species of trees, which will support them. If you have non-native species, non-native oaks, they're not going to support anything in terms of providing food for the birds. And then, of course, the nuts from the beech tree and the oaks, acorns, Native American chestnuts, provide a great deal of food for wildlife. Unfortunately, when they introduce non-native trees and shrubs and vines from Europe and Asia into North America, they often bring in not only an invasive species, but also things that are associated with those plants, like disease-causing fungi or other organisms. We used to have a beautiful American chestnut. 40% of the Appalachian forest was American chestnut. And then they introduced a chestnut from Asia, and it had a fungus on it, which pretty much wiped out the American chestnut within a few decades. So that's another reason to use native plants and not be introducing non-native, potentially invasive species. I think education is a good thing, and the more people are aware of non-native invasive plants and the value of native plants, they'll be encouraged to stop planting non-native invasive plants in their yards and start using more of the native plants. There's an effort called Preserve Burnet Woods. They've been trying to protect Burnet Woods from development. I've been volunteering my time and trying to educate people about the value of the park and trying to keep it as undeveloped as possible. It's a great place to see wildlife. It's an important bird area for the Audubon Society. Lots of birds depend on Burnet Woods. It's like a little green island in the city. It's a great place for teaching about plants. And every time I walk through here, it just sort of refreshes me, mentally and physically. So it means a lot.